Don't give us none of your aggravation. We've had it with your discipline. Saturday night's all right for fighting. Get a little action in. Welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, are the words of former Las Vegas resident musician Elton John. Saturday, folks, is apparently when Nevada goes racing. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm fantastic. Nobody more American than Elton John.
That's right.
Or more emblematic of racing culture in general.
Yeah, I mean, the other big recent... you should go look at the Wikipedia page for the Las Vegas residencies.
Okay.
Like, Celine Dion has brought in like close to $1 billion.
Oh, really?
The multiple residencies. It's insane.
Also, the reason why they do the F1 race weekend this weekend is because this is one of the quietest weeks in Las Vegas. Because it is the week before Thanksgiving.
Before Thanksgiving, sure.
But now F1 brings the noise.
That is Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
Looking forward to the noise. And also this final trio of races before you're back to looking towards the future.
Indeed. Well, if you are new to this... Sorry, Danny. Go ahead.
I'm having a memory of Elton John at like the podium. I'm having like it's either a false memory or I think I remember Elton John doing the post-race interviews. Am I crazy? I'm typing this into Google. You do your thing. I will confirm or deny.
Here. If you are new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to this here Formula One sport itself, we've got an episode just for you. Our preseason primer episode assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. You've got a whole 2024 season to just plow through once you are up to speed. Also, the show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release ad-free versions of the podcast, along with bonus podcasts and videos that are exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. First of all, Danny, before I ask you about Patreon, were you able to find any Elton John F1 content?
What was the year we went to Circuit of the Americas?
2016?
Oh, we missed him by a year.
Oh.
He did the post-race interviews at COTA.
My God.
In 2015. Elton John, as it turns out, legit F1 fan. Apparently he's got some helmets from some of the drivers. He's interviewing Nico Rosberg, who came second on my screen right now. Incredible.
You got to send me that link. I'll put it in the show notes.
Just can't put the jazz man down. Absolutely amazing. What do we got going on? Yesterday we published a podcast on the Steven Spielberg, his directorial debut in terms of movies. Anyway, Duel, which is a fantastic. What is it? A thriller? Kind of a horror movie. It's just
I'd call it a thriller.
It's a pursuit movie, right? Like the genre, like the pursuit story is one of those like basic archetypes of like storytelling, and they can be distilled purely down to this. Duel is one of those.
Yes, Duel is nothing if not a pure movie. It is a small cast, a small number of set pieces, and one gentleman who wants to overtake a truck, and then a truck that really wants to overtake that gentleman. Over the course of 75 minutes until they did a theatrical release and shot 15 more minutes of footage in 3 days. Duel, what an interesting movie, and we did a great little documentary. We did a great little podcast about Duel. Sorry, I've got documentaries on the brain at the moment. I'm in a.
I'd watch that too, a documentary of Duel.
Yes, absolutely, I absolutely would. But you know who will not be watching a documentary on Duel, but is probably listening to this podcast? Our incredible title sponsors. It's me, Ferrario. Get Rich or Die Ryan. Agave ATX. Cyphers Training. Turf SCS. At Team Blackjack. Michael Maves. Gordy's Army. At Talking Autos. Olivia Evans. TelemetryDeck.com. FTC. Drew Stewart. Bailey Foote. Abdallah Al-Thani. Jason Chadwick. Abraham Getchell. The Space Above Us podcast. Bunny Fiend. Snigs. Alex Goucher. Max Valtar. Circuit Demon. Troy Stammer. William Rumpf. Irvine Clinical Research. Lachlan the Maddened Man, Samurai Love Story, and of course, Jason Kelly. Thank you all so much for being with us throughout this season, there's not that much left. And this is the last race in North America. Is it the last race not in the Middle East? Am I right?
That's right. I think we got Qatar and then Abu Dhabi.
And then Abu Dhabi, off we go. Finish the season. But the season could end this coming weekend. At least the Drivers' Championship.
It's true, Danny. And I am going to tell you how that might happen. We're going to do things a little differently here. I'm going to do the quick hits, the news quick hits at the top.
Nice.
And then we'll get into the meatier stuff. When can Verstappen or Norris clinch the 2024 F1 World title, asks the headline in this Autosport article. Well,
how convenient.
I'm here to tell you that, according to the article, to stop Verstappen taking the title on the strip in Las Vegas, Norris joins the army. Norris must outscore Verstappen by at least 3 points.
Okay.
So even if Norris was able to win every race from here on out with the fastest lap, Verstappen would still need to finish 7th or lower in every race, including the sprint, for Norris to be champion. That is some long odds.
Yeah, there really only is one way he can win this championship. And as somebody who's recently watched the movie Duel, I'm very aware of. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't think it's appropriate.
Straightforward from here. There's still a path to victory.
It's an unconventional. Actually, it's not that unconventional. Michael Schumacher did it a few times, and Ayrton Senna did it once as well, at least. But yeah, it's the only way you're stopping Max from winning this championship at this stage is if he is unable to
have friends throw away the super licenses for you.
Yeah,
basically, just with takeout moves.
Just go into his room at nighttime, find where his wallet is, and just take his super license. So then when he's at the race and they ask for him, when they go in, they're like, "Can you show me your super license and registration, please?"
Hide his car keys.
Yeah, right.
Race. Yeah.
Put his hand in a bucket of water too while you're at it.
Isn't his car key that big pole that they stick up the car? Isn't that the key? They put that big. It's like Kingdom Hearts. They put that big thing in and then they twist it, and then that's how the cars start. I know Formula One.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to be needed at this race weekend, but maybe in the future in the next two. F1's new driver cooling device. We've talked a lot about how hot things are getting. The planet is warming. I'm not sure if you're aware.
Yeah, but then at nighttime it gets colder, so don't worry about it. It's just
hold them all the races at night.
It's Las Vegas. It works for Las Vegas.
It sure does. So Formula One is devising ways so that Logan Sargent doesn't have to retire from the race with heat exhaustion.
Oh yeah.
I think Ocon vomited in his helmet, and Lance Stroll briefly passed out. This should not be happening. So they have the FIA come up with some methods they thought about some ways to do it, like with air conditioning. But some of these were decided to be too heavy and too complex to integrate from 2025 onwards. So what we're going to get, it seems like, is water cooling for the drivers.
Oh my God.
So circulating water in a type of vest.
Wait, they're getting still suits?
Yeah. Yeah. Either someone in Dune or your graphics card circa 2004.
Yeah,
I guess water cooling's still a thing.
It's still a thing. Yeah, man, that's amazing.
It's probably easier these days. Anyway, that's what they're going to try in 2025. So look forward to that. They may also increase the weight limit of the cars by 5 kilograms or so.
Wow.
As a result. The fourth or third of our 4 quick hits here. All F1 teams to unveil liveries at the same time for the 2025 season at London O2.
Yes, the O2 is a venue.
Okay.
It was previously called the Millennium Dome. It was a concert.
Like their Sphere.
Yeah, like the Sphere. Like that's what the technology we had in the year like 1998 when they were building a stadium.
Only enough for half a sphere.
Yeah, it's
The
like
dome.
on the Docklands north of the river in East London, and is they do events there, like the MCM Expo and a bunch of other things are out there, or Eurogamer, I forget what it's called now. But yeah, the O2 is like it's like a mobile phone carrier in the UK. So
Okay, so they're selling tickets to this thing. All 10 teams, all 20 drivers, all 10 team principals going to be here to show off their 2025 liveries. Maybe not all of the cars, because some of you listening may know that what's shown at the livery reveal is not necessarily the actual aerodynamics packages,
But testing is like 2 days later, right? So it's not like it's a massive deal. Yeah.
Rob, you pasted a companion article here about third-party tickets.
Yeah, just that they're banning third-party tickets from the event, and as you might expect, it's kind of controversial in part because like the move is clearly going to target scalpers, but also that is how people get tickets to things like this. So it's not a popular decision so far, and I think there's also always that lurking behind it. There's that concern that F1 really wants to. Everyone really like to get rid of scalpers and instead introduce really aggressive dynamic pricing, so that they can open like the first block of tickets at like $20,000 a pop and see who bites. That would be their ideal. Like, what if all that lost value that's taken by resellers is taken by us? But yeah, so the F1 has said they're not going to take tickets that way. And not a popular thing so far, given how tricky it is to get tickets when they're first made available for like literally any F1 event.
Well, the tickets are going to be even tougher to get this time because it's an event being led by Brian Burke Creative, the company behind the opening and closing ceremonies of the inaugural Las Vegas Grand Prix in 2023. Remember that?
Yeah, Bruce
What
Buffer,
a
baby.
cool time.
I am interested in how much pomp and circumstance is going to happen this year, based on the fact that there was a lot of that, and it was the first year, and everyone seemed to think it was lame. So
Yes.
yeah, hopefully not that much.
Well, do you think Justin Bieber is lame? Because he and Peter Kay and Madonna are all coming to this O2 thing as well.
Okay, how many of the people on this podcast know who the second name in that list is?
Not me.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Do you?
He is a British comedian. Yes, Peter Kay.
Okay.
He is.
Okay, I do hope they bring back Spliff the Magic Dragon or whatever to the like he was part of the Sky TV coverage and did shitty magic for Charles and Carlos Sainz. I hope they bring that guy back.
Who is Spliff?
Look, it was a guy in dinosaur pajamas doing magic for the Ferrari boys.
It wasn't.
And
okay. Oh yeah, I do remember this. It
was
wasn't Puff the
surpri-
Magic Dragon. That is a British
no,
children's
Puff the Magic
TV
Dragon
show.
was a beloved children's cartoon figure.
Like
Yeah, no, this was like
Bagpuss, yeah.
Spliff. And he was a little irreverent. Yeah.
I do remember this. It was sort of like the sort of affect of what's the name of that dog that insults people again?
Yeah,
Triumph.
insult, Triumph.
Yeah, it was that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Man. God. Peter Kay. Who knew?
Well, my next story here is about the CEO of Liberty Media, the owner of F1, stepping down. I'm sure it had nothing to do with Spliff the Magic Dragon, but one can never know truly. Greg Maffei, current CEO of Liberty Media, will leave his role by the end of 2024, according to this Autosport article. And he has come out there and said this. This is not a rumor. He says, the almost 20 years I've spent at the helm of Liberty Media have been incredibly rewarding, stimulating, and endlessly eventful. It seems like this is not a big story. It seems like this was a long time coming. He's got the chairman of the board is taking over in the interim. He oversaw the acquisition of MotoGP, which is going to be closing, I think, fairly soon. So this just seems like a passing of the torch rather than any kind of drama.
This is I guess we're mentioning this because coming off the hot off the heels of Niels Wittich being let go,
Yes.
leaving
we'll
his
get
position
to.
as race director, but seemingly he was fired. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Before we get that, Danny, we've got a news story here about the Canadian Grand Prix
Yeah, they're mixing
and the wider schedule.
Yeah, for 2026, they're making a couple of changes, which I feel like on this podcast in our preseason primer we talk about every single year, which is why are you not putting some of these races that are clearly in the same region together at the same time, you silly people. So basically what they have announced at this stage is that the Canadian Grand Prix is going to be coming a couple of weeks earlier than usual. It's
For 2026, right?
For 2026, so not next year, the year after that. It's now going to be in, so they haven't announced the calendar for 2026 yet. They're just giving some like general updates on where stuff's going to land. So Canada's now going to be in the 3rd or 4th weekend of May each year going forward. I believe Canada is contracted up until 2031, rather than mid-June, which is where it usually was. This is to sort of keep it in the same pocket as Miami, which happens around that time as well in early May. The move also follows news that Monaco is going to be shifted from what was its traditional slot at the end of May to now the first week in June from 2026 onward as well. Then another update to keep in mind for next year, not for 2026, is that the opening of the season is going to involve a bunch of the Oceania races together. So we're having our sort of traditional starting in Australia thing, but then they're going to go to Japan and China before going to Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And the reason for that is that Ramadan this year is it's around the time where it changes every year, of course, a little bit earlier every year, and now it was going to be basically when the races were on, this year, which was a couple of weeks earlier. So those are the updates. As is, there is no calendar for 2026 been released yet. But obviously we have all of next year to look forward to before we care about that.
I'm glad they're doing this.
Yeah,
This makes so much more sense.
Yeah, they talked about, like, I get it. When you have these contracts with these things, it's like moving a bunch of ships at the same time. Ramadan in this case is probably doing them a favor because it's like, those events probably also do want to change where the races are. And it's not so tricky, I guess, to do it. But it's always been a bit silly. They've bounced around and they're always talking about sustainability, yada, yada, yada. And the more races get put on the track and the more all these engineers have to be away from their families for long extended periods because we're bouncing back and forth. Canada was the big one. Canada was the one where we're like, why are we going to Canada? It's in the middle of all the European things.
Right,
so now that
they
Miami is there.
Jump over and then jump back. It's just ridiculous.
I mean, it would still make more sense to do Miami in Canada around the time of this, but I think you probably can't do Canada in November. Whereas some of these other ones, I mean, Miami as well. I don't know. Is that okay? Or is there a risk of it being in, like, it's a little bit too close to the fall sort of storm season?
Like
hurricane stuff?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. The reason they do Vegas, obviously, at this time of year and at nighttime is because it's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I checked it's like
It's
9
gonna
degrees
be
centigrade.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
We'll get to that during the track walk. All right, final news story here. Rob, you love drama.
Ooh.
More drama coming out of the FIA. Another departure this past week. This time, Paolo Basari has quit as compliance officer of Formula One's governing body of the FIA. So this is a story from the BBC, and it is interesting mostly because didn't quit. The word is he was fired, and. Quoting from the story here, multiple sources, both at and close to the FIA, said the Italian had been fired as a consequence of FIA president Mohammed Ben Sulayem losing confidence in him. Basari is said to have pushed back against or tried to navigate around a number of requests from Ben Sulayem, who took exception to that approach. Some of the things that he's been sort of caught up in, Ben Sulayem has a whole bunch of issues that have sort of cropped up in recent years. There was also an investigation as to whether he interfered in race operations back in 2023. Basari was involved in putting that report together. Now, whether that is a thing where, as compliance officer, anytime an issue like that comes up, it falls across your desk, it goes out under your signature, basically, or whether he was actually kind of leading the investigation. It's kind of hard to say. But it is just kind of further evidence that things are not great at the FIA. Obviously last week we were talking about Niels Wittich leaving as race director, again kind of under weird circumstances. And I saw some coverage in Autosport noting that getting rid of Wittich corresponded to Ben Sulayem having made a point about what a great job he was doing, putting sort of an assembly line together to train up more race direction and race enforcement talent for motorsport. So, some connection being drawn there between one of his pet initiatives and then someone being sort of pushed out, maybe as if to demonstrate how well the FIA can function, relying on this pipeline that Sulayem's put together. So, yeah, I think this is a funny story just because it kind of seems like between the lines, this is someone being fired because he thought his boss was an idiot and just kind of started trying to not listen to his boss, which is always a dicey play, but one I endorse, right? Like, sometimes you're kind of left with no choice where I can either, not gonna quit. Yeah, I like this job. It's not my fault you're too dumb to do yours. So, sometimes I can get with this. It's insubordinate, but insubordination's kind of it really depends, right? Like, a mutiny's only wrong if the captain is capable of steering the ship.
Yeah, I think the part that caught my eye of this article is when they talk about Wittich, who, if you recall our last episode, we had talked about the FIA said that he had stepped down, and then I think he wasn't forthcoming with talking about the reasons. He has since told BBC Sport, I can confirm that I got fired and it was not my decision to leave F1. So we all kind of knew that because why would you vote? It doesn't make sense to step down with 3 races to go. So yeah, weird stuff going on at the FIA.
Yeah. I mean, this
Fires,
guy, it seems like there's no smoke without fire. I mean, there's no fire without fire. There's no argument against the fact that people think this guy is not fit for the job, and clearly, that's also the case within the organization and in F1 and with the drivers and with a lot of the teams. He's incredibly unpopular. I don't understand the power dynamics, where I guess he's vulnerable, what mechanisms have to occur for him to be relieved of his job. But it does seem like the type of thing everyone might want to have done before, next year. But then the problem is this is, FIA.
So it's an elected
F1,
position. He was talking
right?
about this around some of the controversy. He was like, if people are unhappy with the job, I love democracy. People can just vote me out.
Do you love democracy? Isn't he Saudi Arabian?
But the FIA, it has its democratic values, and he can be voted out. If anyone chooses to run against him for FIA president, he could be voted out. Now, I don't know how those votes are apportioned, right? Is it just majority vote of member clubs of the FIA? Is it based on dues paid into it, which I think could be was one of the decisive things to it. Like with anything, organizations like the FIA are always kind of looking around for where's the next big funding source going to be. especially as like enthusiasm for like car clubs might wane in other parts of the world. So that might explain why someone like Solam was attractive in this role. But I am right now, as of now, he doesn't have like any announced opposition. But it kind of does feel like somebody needs to give him the hook, right? Like this is turning into a 3-alarm fire, I guess is the way I would put it. Like this could get bad, because like especially if the new race director proves not to be up to the task, right? Or there's this general sense of like all these positions going vacant. Just the basic administrative function of the organization isn't really working.
And it is an administrative body. Like we shouldn't be talking about it this much. It's like 100%. Why? You're just there to make the rules. Like anyway. All right. Well, that's it for news. We're gonna take a break and then we'll be back with the track walk. All right, Denny, Las Vegas. What do you got for us?
That's what it's called. Las Vegas. We came here for the first time in 2023. No, we didn't. Well, technically, it was the first Las Vegas Grand Prix because the other 2 times we were here, they were called the Caesars Palace Grand Prix.
Wow.
Which is like something we'd hear on Race Around the World. You know, in fairness, though, it was accurate because they were not driving around Las Vegas. They were driving around Caesars Palace. They were driving around the car park for 2 years, 1981 and 1982. Not particularly popular. Vegas seems like a town where people try things to see if it brings in punters, and if it doesn't work, they just move on to the next idea. That was one of the ones that they moved on from. So it took a good 40 years for us to come back and for them to do the sort of proper Las Vegas Grand Prix. Really off the back of the heightened popularity of the sport in the US. And we've obviously seen the expansion in Miami. I mean, the expansion into Circuit of the Americas, quite frankly, within the lifetime of this podcast. Miami as well, of course. Las Vegas added to that last year. This is a very different course in some ways to many of the other race tracks we get, probably in terms of the spectacle more than anything else. It is sort of in line with a lot of recent additions that it is a road course in a city, which we see in Miami and Jeddah and other places. But this one's done at nighttime, much like Singapore. But here, of course, in the American Southwest, in Las Vegas at nighttime, which, as Drew, as I'm sure we'll get into, is quite a cold part of the world. You might not think it if you're not from up here, but of course Vegas and much of that part of Nevada is a little bit higher than sea level, and also it's the desert. And in the daytime in the desert, it can be a little bit warm in the fall and the winter. Well, maybe not in the winter. In the summer, it's obviously baking heat, and in nighttime, though, in the desert, especially if there's no cloud cover, a lot of that heat dissipates pretty quickly. So when you're in this time of year, it's not really that hot during the day. It's very sunny usually in Vegas around this time of year, but it gets pretty cold pretty quickly. That was a problem last year when Carlos Sainz flipped one of the manhole covers 30 minutes into last year's session, and it was delayed for, I think it was 2.5 hours in the end, where they had to go around and fix all of the utility lids, as they called them. More on that in a second. So this is a 50-lap race, 6.2 kilometers, 3.85 miles. Pretty meaty. It's a pretty long lap, all things considered. They drive all the way down the Las Vegas Strip, and the vast majority, well, a decent chunk of it, let's say. No track changes this year, according to the event holders, which is interesting because usually, into Baku or any of these other places, they usually, in Jeddah, they did a lot of reformatting curbs, like maybe, not changing the number of turns, but like changing the angle of approach perhaps, or the sight lines, anything like that. They've not done any of that this year. It seems like a big reason for that is the amount of disruption that happened in Las Vegas for last year's race. We were hearing for weeks and weeks and weeks about how much traffic in the city was affected by it. According to one of the event people who run the event, there was a 65% reduction in preparation time this year because they sort of knew what they were doing this time around, and they had a lot of the stuff built this time around. F1 has actually purchased like a large area near the strip, which is what they're using for their sort of Parc Fermé / entertainment zone. So they're able to stage some stuff there. But apparently, it was incredibly popular last year, and they're wanting to make sure that I guess it doesn't disrupt people too much on the start of the bank holiday break. One little update on this before I talk about the track for a quick second is the F1 Academy. They just announced the calendar for that for next year, 2025, and it is going to finish in Las Vegas next year.
Oh,
so
cool.
it'll be the final round, which is pretty cool. So the track itself, it's
It looks like Spider-Pig.
yeah, it does. It looks like Spider-Pig. It looks like a pig upside down. What do you guys remember about last year's? Because my prevailing memory of last year was I just liked looking at it, and everyone seemed to be maybe overtaking at the end of like Sector 2 and Sector 3. Like there was a couple of corners where you were throwing it down the inside. Turn 14, I think, was the big one. It's got a big runoff after it. That's where Checo was trying to overtake, and Lando or Verstappen was having good battles there. But for the rest of it, I didn't think there was much overtaking happening at all.
I remember the onboards being awesome.
Yeah.
That's about it.
They did a good job filming it last year.
Yes.
And there was some incidents. There was a couple of crashes and things like that. But I'm not sure, it was more spectacle maybe than entertaining in terms of the race.
I like the part where the manhole cover went off like a landmine beneath that Ferrari. And then Fred spent an entire press conference getting increasingly furious about it. And
He didn't that ruin his
told
car for the
Tom
weekend?
Clarkson, go ahead and ask me one more fucking time about how
yeah.
I feel about this event.
Did that? I'm trying to remember. Did that destroy his car for the weekend or something? I can't remember. Was it really bad?
I think they got it back out there, but I think from his position, because he had to eat penalties for replacing
That's
the
what it
engine
was. That's
and
what
all
it
the
was.
hardware.
That's what it was.
That's why
Yeah.
he was so
I
mad.
knew there was something.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to, because he had to replace was it the engine or something?
Yeah.
Gearbox,
Yeah,
I think it
press
might have been.
conference where he's like seething, and you got multiple other team principals being like, "Can we please, stop asking Fred to say something nice about Vegas?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen."
And I believe if I remember our preseason primary this year, I think they changed the rule, didn't they? Because of that? They were talking about how, we have to change that next year. And I think they did. The chances of it
Because it
happening
hasn't
again
come
are-
up.
Yeah.
They did. Sorry, I do have a quote here from one of the event organizers. It said, all of the utility lids along the circuit have really undergone a rigorous process to secure them. So this is clearly something that they are, aware of. But It is funny how this keeps happening. This happened in Baku as well.
Sure.
Where, it's just like and that was before ground effect, and it still managed to suck up the manhole and have it take it out. I'm not sure if that's exactly what happened this year, or did he just drive into it or whatever. But yeah. So I don't know. Last year was such a weird race because it was an interesting. I mean, I do remember a lot of action in Sector 3, but apart from that, it didn't seem crazy in terms of the overtaking. So I don't know. It's hard to tell where there will be overtaking this year.
Yeah, I think the prospect of a sophomore race is interesting because it's, what did the teams learn? Will they be able to apply what they've learned? Similar
Track
conditions.
surface is weird too because
Yeah,
they
it's
did
a
surface
real
it,
road.
but it's a real road, exactly. So it's a bit
Yeah.
like Monaco. I wonder what it'll be like this time around.
And it's going to be cold. It's going to be 52 degrees Fahrenheit or 11 Celsius at qualifying time. A little warmer at race time, 62 or 17 Celsius. Zero precipitation, actually technically 4% on race day. And low winds on qualifying day, but picking up on race day 12 miles an hour out of the south or 19 kilometers an hour. So not sure how that plays into something like Vegas, which is, surrounded by a bunch of buildings, but who knows? And with that, let's get to the driver standings as we head into the last three races of the year. And they're all back to back here. So buckle up.
Here we go.
Max Verstappen is on top with 393. Lando Norris in second with 331. Charles Leclerc is in third. I probably wouldn't have been able to tell you that if you had asked me. He's in third with 307 points. Oscar Piastri in fourth with 262. Carlos Sainz is in fifth with 244. And then we've got Russell with 192. Hamilton with 190. also surprising. I would have expected George to have way more points than Hamilton, just by vibes alone, but they're only 2 apart. Perez is in 8th place with 151. Alonso is in 9th with 62, and then Hulkenberg holding strong in 10th with 31. Then we've got Tsunoda with 28, Gasly with 26, Stroll with 24, Ocon with 23. Magnussen has 14 points in 15th place. Then we've got Albon and Ricciardo tied at 12 points. Oliver Behrman is in 18th with 7 points. Then Franco Colapinto has 5. Liam Lawson in 20th place with 4 points. And then Zhou Guanyu, Logan Sargent, and Valtteri Bottas with 0 points. In the constructor standings, McLaren is on top with 593 points. Ferrari is in second with 557. Red Bull Racing just 13 points behind with 544. Mercedes is in 4th with 382. It seems like they've got that one locked. Yeah. Aston Martin's in 5th with 86. Alpine is in 6th place with 49 points, 3 points ahead of Gene Haas and team, who are currently sitting in 7th.
Come on, Haas. I'm pulling for you.
And they are only 2 points ahead of RB,
who's
sitting in 8th. So this is the battle here, folks.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars at stake in prize money.
Yuki bins it. Yuki's going to bin it, I'm telling you. That's what's going to happen. I'm not putting that out there like I want it to happen. Just saying that's probably what's going to happen this week.
Wow. All right. Williams is in 9th with 17 points. Sauber, of course, still with the goose egg. You can get points of your own in the official Shift+F1 Fantasy League. You can join it using the link in the show notes. And you can also send us an email, shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. I'm going to kick some emails off here with this one from Lucas, who says, Dear Shift+F1 Pod, Brazilian listener here. In episode 289, there was some confusion around the idiom, pulling the ember to my sardine.
Oh, yeah.
This might simply be cultural knowledge that it can't be transmitted by the expression alone, but when one says, I pulled the ember to my sardine, what is implied is that there are many other people who also have sardines and would love to have an ember themselves. Also implied, we do not like our sardines raw in Brazil. So this makes sense. There are many sardines, but one ember, and I'm keeping my sardine toasty. In that sense, the expression means way more something like, to take advantage of a situation, even to the detriment of others, egotistically. It might be used when we want to show off how smart we are while screwing over others. Hope this helps. Your friend, Lucas.
In what scenario would you want to use that idiom? Like you're just
not
being
sure.
you're just being a real sociopath, or it's not like an endearing. I guess like there are idioms where people are being selfish, but like that's a particularly callous one. Like, okay, man, share the ember. Let everyone else roast their sardines.
No, mine. Danny, you want to take this one from Burton?
Burton from Colorado says, hey, y'all, I'm writing this right after quali got cancelled for Brazil on Saturday. It got me thinking, is there any sort of official policy in place for when a race could happen without qualifying? What would they base positions on? Driver standing, sprint qualifying, random draw? Hopefully it's fine by tomorrow, but it got me thinking. Thanks, Burton from Colorado. There was a lot of conversation around this when it happened, and because it was a sprint weekend, I was also somewhat confused by this, because the usual answer, which is they oftentimes go by the by the P3 standings, which are not ideal because it's not necessarily race time, but generally in practice 3, people have sort of dialed in their cars and are putting in good laps. People don't tend to do that in P1. P1 seems to be more of a test some stuff out and see how the car is set up kind of thing. And I was like, oh God, would they go by P1? Would they, the question was then answered, would they go by sprint qualifying? Or would they go by sprint, the final standings in the sprint race? The real answer to all this, we'll get to the actual answer in a second, but the real answer is they work as hard as possible to make sure the qualifying happens, and they always try and do it the next day. So that in the modern era, I can't remember the last time they actually didn't manage to squeeze in quali on the Sunday, just in case. So Drew, I've not read this article that's linked here that has the
Yeah.
actual answer, but I think my answer is it's usually P3, and in the event that they couldn't have done it in Brazil, it would have been practice on Friday.
Yeah, free practice 1, you mean?
Yes, free practice 1's standings.
That is pretty much correct. So
Okay.
motorsport.com has an article here that came out just around this time trying to answer this question. Weirdly, there isn't really a part in the rules that says what happens when qualifying doesn't happen. However, there is a scenario for dealing with drivers who are unclassified. So that's for any driver that, quote, failed to set a time in Q1 or SQ1, or if all their laps were deleted. And in that case, then they would go to free practice 3, or in the case of sprint, free practice 1. So if they decided to treat everyone as if they were unclassified, they would have gone to free practice 1.
Okay.
However, this is changing for 2025 because they are adjusting these sporting regulations to state, in the exceptional circumstance that qualifying does not take place, with the acceptance of the stewards that the session cannot take place, the grid for the race will be defined based upon the driver's championship classification.
Oh, interesting. I guess that's the pragmatic but sort of boring and bad for the sport way to do it, because it basically just creates the most obvious, least interesting version of the grid. But sure, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sorry,
there's your answer.
Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, right. Rob, you want to take this next one?
Yeah. This one comes from Ben from Saskatoon. Hey guys, first time emailer has listened since the Alt F1 days. Oh, yeah. I figured I'd chime in since Danny was curious about where the huge amount of support for Franco Colapinto in the stands at the Brazil GP came from, along with a bit more about Colapinto's completely wild rise to fame over the last 2 months since English-speaking F1 media has barely been reporting on this. Colapinto has become massively popular in Latin America, especially at home in Argentina over the last 2 months. Franco has also become something of a media darling to Spanish-speaking media. He's decent at interviews in English, but in Spanish, he's on a different level. Super goofy and charming. I've seen a lot of comparisons between him and Danny Rick in terms of natural charisma. To put things into perspective of what this has done for his popularity, on Sky F1 this past weekend, they mentioned that all the flights from Argentina to Sao Paulo had sold out, and there was a huge number of Argentines in the crowds who had traveled specifically to see Colapinto. Mexico and Austin both had crowds of Argentines in attendance to cheer on Colapinto. To drive home how big Colapinto is becoming and who is supporting him, the Williams Garage over the past 2 races has been host to one of Colapinto's longtime personal backers, the Argentine music producer who goes by Bizarrap or Bizarrap. I don't know which one it is.
Either way, one way you sound like an old man.
I do.
Who's out of touch.
Bizarrap has won multiple Latin Grammys and has a big fan base, 20 million followers on Instagram, 30 million monthly listeners on Spotify. He uses his fame to help up-and-coming Argentine athletes and find sponsorship, funding for their careers, Colapinto included. Williams even just released a special Spanish-language episode of Team Torque with Colapinto, Bizarrap, and a couple other prominent Argentine musicians, one named Nicky Nicole, another named Dookie. Both have over 20 million listeners on Spotify, who were also in the Williams Garage during the Mexican GP weekend. There's also the sponsorship angle to Colapinto. The bright new yellow engine cover on the Williams car and the driver outfits are because of a company called Mercado Libre, which is an Amazon equivalent company for South and Central America. They started in Argentina and are everywhere in the region now. Several other Argentine companies are on the Williams car now too. Alongside all of them, there have been rumors that Carlos Slim, who has a bunch of business interests in South America, is also considering supporting Colapinto like he does with Sergio Perez. Slim's team sponsorship of Red Bull is shrinking dramatically. He cites Red Bull's deal with AT&T as the reason, since they are competitors to his companies, and he's instead personally sponsoring Perez. So now he's considering other options as well.
Probably smart.
It's interesting how much, like, in the past thank you so much. That gives me
Yeah.
I was wondering why an Argentinian racer was getting so much heat in Brazil. Like, it's not like there's no love there, but it seemed particularly interesting in Interlagos, which is also like a sort of a bastion of Brazilianness. So that's crazy. But the idea that like we're probably never going to get this version of him, maybe, you know what I mean? If he's that charismatic. And this goes into the conversation we were having a few weeks ago about how the Colapinto thing has become this weird little arms race now, where Williams sort of they have a great hand with him, and we do have other, you know, teams basically trying to jump in there now, like Red Bull, trying to see if they can grab him for an RB seat or maybe even a Red Bull seat, especially now that Checo is basically, you know, shat the bed, as it were, for the last half of this season. Like, that was clearly the wrong decision, and they're ruining it now. So interesting. Sounds like we have a charismatic South American driver. Like, those guys tend to do pretty well in the sport. Let's put it that way. Even the non-charismatic ones. I love you, Ruben Sparkello.
The social media stuff on the Williams side has been pretty good. Like, there is, you can sort of pick up just how like good Colapinto is at this, and like good at dialing in. Like, yeah, it's weird. It's like being good on social media requires sort of being authentically weird is kind of the vibe, and he's kind of good at that. And yeah, he's got that. He's very much built for the type of media environment he's in. The one thing I wonder about is, remember in IndyCar, there were all those issues with Agustin Canapino, who, now admittedly the guy was a bit prickly, but I think part of it was, I think he was also Argentine, and the issue they ran into there was the fanatical social media following was like sort of brigading other drivers that he got into it with.
Yeah.
Now it seems like there's a totally different scale of fame happening here with Colapinto. But I am kind of curious what's going to happen if you run into that scenario of like really enthusiastic, passionate nationalist fan base that like just has been totally invisible to English-speaking media and like social media teams, suddenly smacking headlong into something like F1. But yeah, it's kind of it's an interesting moment, because it does feel like his sort of emergence has thrown a monkey wrench into the driver market. That this was just not. It was kind of like, whose guy is this? It was a little bit the scenario. Like, it didn't seem like he was really tapped to be like the next prospect. It's just things with Sargent went so poorly, and now there's a few people who might be looking at like maybe an emergency replacement scenario.
Yeah, it's like the end of the first act of a Disney movie. You know, like a Disney sports movie, where like the local crummy kid with the bad equipment finally gets on the plate and hits a homer, hits a grand slam. That whole thing. Colapinto.
Cool.
The movie.
Thank you, Ben. Should we take this one more here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
It's been a short podcast so far.
This is Brent Glenn from Dublin. This is a long one.
Hey, Dublin, California, Dublin, Ireland.
I'm thinking the Ireland.
Hey.
Glenn writes, "Hello, gents. Sorry for the madly late..." Yep, Dublin, Ireland.
Check.
Sorry for the madly late submission about this year's race at Silverstone. Just sharing my thoughts of what it was like as an all-access guest.
Ooh, la-di-da, Glenn. We've come up in
Firstly, the world. I was a guest of OnlyFans American Racing Team.
Oh my God, what?
Yes, here we
Glenn, let's hang out, bro.
Parentheses. The company I work for is in partnership with a team sponsor. I'm keeping the company names out of this because there is a bit of sensitivity with sharing sponsorship with an adult brand. Ooh. Big business is very old-fashioned. As a lifelong racing fan, it is simply something special to just walk along the paddock, bump into past and current bikers. This is, by the way, OnlyFans American Racing Team is a MotoGP, Moto2
awesome. Okay.
team. Bump into past and current bikers and F1 drivers, including lots of F1 crew you'd know. I managed to chat and get pics with Mark Marquez, Pecco Bagnaia, Weber. Who's Weber?
Mark Webber, F1.
Is it Mark Webber?
Yeah. Must be.
Okay. It's in the context of a bunch of MotoGP.
Oh, yeah.
A bunch of Moto2 riders and even a few F1 faces. Zach Brown, Bernie Collins, Crofty, and so on. Wow, that's great. We were about halfway up the paddock when our sponsor guide said, "Do you want to see the bikes?" To which we obviously said yes. We were brought through a plain back door, which was clearly the fast in and out way for the drivers and mechanics to get to the garages. And then we saw them. One bike fully assembled, one in rebuild. Incredible to see the guys working on them. We were there with no questions, just walked around the garage, could look at anything as long as we didn't touch them parts. So cool. Then Joe Roberts, who's one of the riders for OnlyFans American Racing Team, walked in very friendly and even let me try on his helmet and gloves. It was at that moment I fully realized just how small these guys are. The opening of the helmet didn't go past the top of my head, and zero chance with the gloves. I'm a fairly average guy, 6 foot and about 80 kilograms. After this, we were brought out and went for a stroll up and down the pits, literally seeing every team and bike. Shutters were up as the Meet the Bikers part of the show was about to happen. But anyway, I could go on for days how amazing it was to be in the garages at Silverstone. Right? The racing. This is where the long track at Silverstone doesn't work for the bikes. Unlike F1 cars that space out after about a few laps, this isn't exactly true for the bikes. As the race starts, it's incredible to see the acceleration and power of these machines. You can literally feel them go past you. But yeah, they go past you, and then for almost 2 minutes, nothing. Then 10 seconds of bikes flying by, followed by 2 minutes of nothing, then 10 seconds of bikes. The bikes are so tightly packed, it creates massive gaps of nothing. If they didn't have the screens and live commentary, I would say Silverstone is straight bad for bikes. Biggest positive was that the homeboy Jake Dixon won the Moto2 race. It was amazing to see the crowd explode with cheer when he crossed the line. I even forgot I was an Irishman and cheered too.
Oh, careful,
but just for
here.
a moment, I came to my senses soon after.
Careful, Glenn. They wouldn't let you back in.
Silverstone as a location, as an event, 10 out of 10. There was live music, the darkness.
Oh my God, hell yeah.
Bike shows, stunt shows.
Yeah.
Wow, stunt shows. And a lot of fun stuff to watch and do. Silverstone as a racetrack for bikes, man, maybe a 4 out of 10. We could be literally chatting, watching the screens, and then watch the bikes for the 10 seconds while they were in front of us, then immediately back to the screen to know what's happening. Silverstone as a sponsor guest, 10 out of 10. I don't know how you can't say this isn't dreamy as a race fan. Seeing the teams, bikes, riders, even the paddock up close is not something the average fan will ever get to do, so I'm forever thankful to the sponsor that invited us. Anyway, love the show. Listening since the alt days. Glenn from Dublin signing out.
Class. Cheers, Glenn. That sounds great. Yeah, it's interesting how something that surely there can be no negative to the fact that the MotoGP field is that tight, that they're all in the mix together. But yeah, I guess if it's at a live race and it's that spread out and that long like Silverstone is for a moto course, that must feel really anticlimactic. You know what I mean? To be surrounded by... I've never been in a stadium surrounded by like thousands, tens of thousands of people and there's nothing to do, you know, for like minutes on end. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
I feel like Moto Field's spread out a little bit, but maybe there's something with Silverstone that keeps them like from really running out a big lead on each other. Like I know it's
a
more
long track for
pack-based
bikes.
than it's definitely more pack-based than like F1, but
yeah. I'm trying to think like what's the circuit length of Barcelona or something. I know that Silverstone is decently long, but yeah, I don't know. I'll have to have do a little bit of research. 4.657 kilometers for Barcelona, and Silverstone is...
The important thing is, like, OnlyFans, please.
Shorter. 2.9.
Make us your special guests.
That can't be right.
Do I need to start an OnlyFans to get into this? Maybe
Wow,
I will.
Maybe I'm crazy. It says Barcelona's longer, it says.
Huh.
2.9 miles and Silverstone's 1.8. Huh. No, that can't be right. That must. I don't know. I don't know what the moto circuit is actually for either of those. I know it's not that crazily different. I don't think Barcelona, maybe they edge off that. They had that little turn at the end. Yeah, exactly. Come on, OnlyFans. Come on, Patreon. Sponsor a, DTM team.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, Danny, now that you said it, should we take it around the world?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
As we mentioned at the top, it is getting into the winter of racing. Racing's winter.
Winter is coming.
Yes, for racing, for us all, which means not a lot of cars going around tracks. There are cars, however, going along dirt roads. World Rally Championship. I think this is their final round this weekend. The Forum 8 Rally Japan in Aichi Prefecture.
Ooh.
That's right. It's in
That's
the
a new
Chubu region of Honshu.
Oh, of course.
Yep. And then we've got Formula One. That's it.
Wow.
I'm going to list the times here in Pacific time because it is less insane that way. Thursday, November 21st, Free Practice 1 at 6:30 p.m. on ESPN News. Free Practice 2, 10 p.m. local time, Pacific time, is the same this time.
Unless a manhole
ESPN
cover
2.
comes up, and then it'll be
That's
after
right.
midnight.
That's right. Friday, November 22nd, is Free Practice 3 at 6:30 p.m. on ESPN News, followed by qualifying. Yes, on Friday at 10 p.m. Pacific time on ESPN. And the race, everyone, Saturday, sorry for fighting, November 23rd at 10 p.m. on ESPN.
It's very strange. It's normal for most people, but for us, it'll be very strange because we are but an hour, myself and Drew are but an hour from Las Vegas.
I don't know that it's normal for most people, right? Because it's like 7 hours. Races,
you're right.
our time are usually like 5 a.m., right?
Yeah, so I guess in the UK, it's like weirdly early.
Yeah, really early in the morning. Weird.
It is weird. I don't know why
Time
they
is
do it
weird.
at night. I guess they do it at night because the lights are on. That's it. I think that's literally the reason.
Oh, and probably less traffic, right?
I mean, they must have the roads closed all day, do they?
I don't know.
I don't know.
But that's what's happening this weekend. Danny, what has happened this day in the past?
In the past, November 20th, Formula One has never really cracked the USA. When was this book published? This is considering what we've talked about for the past.
Let's talk about Caesar's
hour.
Palace.
This
man.
is God. I hope that's what they're talking about. Oh my God. It says has never really cracked the USA, and the United States Grand Prix held today in 1960 at the Riverside International Raceway in California attracted a paltry 25,000 strong crowd. Despite Riverside resident Dan Gurney's involvement, it was the last race of the season. Jesus, that's even worse. What? And Jack Brabham had already wrapped up the World Championship while Enzo Ferrari didn't even bother sending his cars to the event. It was a different time, my friends. Wow. Sterling Moss drove
That
in.
is when you say, fuck it. We both stay home.
Sterling Moss drove an impressive race to win from Innis, Ireland, to complete a Lotus 1-2. Local hero Gurney had a miserable time and had to retire on lap 18 after his car overheated. Oh my God. Michael Schumacher had to make even more room in his bulging trophy cabinet on this day in 2004
Sponsored
when
by
he was
OnlyFans.
voted Germany's greatest sportsman of the 20th century in a national poll by television viewers. Shuey, who beat Franz Beckenbauer and Boris Becker, one of those people ended up in jail for a while. I think was it tax? Was it Boris Becker or something?
I don't
like
know.
that?
I've never heard of either of those people.
To the award said, I never would have expected an honor like this. It's a total surprise. he was booned by the fact that a good 10 to 15 years of German sports was sort of wiped off the history books there. So, you know, there's that.
All right. Well, thanks, Danny. Do you have any final thoughts ahead of this Las Vegas Grand Prix?
Am I going to have to pick between Thursday Night Football and watching practice? Is that what's happening?
I
think it is. I think it is. Yeah. It's weird. The problem, what's going to happen here, you know, when you're like, have you ever been to Alcatraz?
Yes.
Okay, you did it. You know the way a lot of people, when they live in like an area, they don't do the touristy thing around that area? My fear with the Vegas Grand Prix is I know I can always go, and I'm in Vegas probably once a year anyway for something. That every year I'm like, I'll go this year. And I'm like, I'll go the next time. And eventually it's going to be over. Or it's going to be such a boring race that the novelty value will have gone off, and I really don't want to go. So I've been flirting with going this year. I had that big deadline. I thought the race was after the deadline because I wasn't thinking past the deadline. The documentary I mentioned last week, by the way, is now out. It's about Half-Life 2. It's on Valve's YouTube channel if you're a big nerd.
And I am.
There you go. Rob's already watched a chapter over breakfast. Thank you, Rob. It's 2 hours long though. Sorry, everyone. But yeah, so I'm excited to watch it. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna feel a little bit like I wish I was there. And I think I might make the effort next year to make it happen. Maybe
do you know if ticket prices have come down?
I actually haven't looked at them yet, but I did a while back, and it looked like there were reasonable prices. They're not the best seats, some of them, but for this one, I think I'd just be happy to be around for it a little bit. You know,
you got that Gabe Newell money now.
Well, I don't quite have. He owns a racing team.
That's right.
Hard racing.
One of the guys we interviewed in the documentary, Jan Bernier, who is a engineer at Valve, races in Ferrari Challenge, and which is the Ferrari Challenge. It's like it's like a rich boy racing league or whatever. He's pretty fucking good. All their stats are online, so you can go check out how well he's done. And before and after the interview, I was asking, and he was telling me about what the cornering, what it's like. He was driving in Imola a few weeks ago, and he was telling me all the ones he's raced at. He'd raced at about 6 or 7 different F1 tracks. And then I was actually walking past his office when the red flag happened with Leclerc, which race was that? About 3 weeks ago. So we had a bit of a chinwag about that. So you say that, but Gabe Newell and Jan own an F1 team together, or not an F1 team. They own a racing league together. So there you go. There is some crossover between the world of racing and the world of Gordon Freeman.
That's right. Rob Zachney, final thoughts.
Gabe, the Shift+F1 livery has plenty of room for you on it, buddy.
We can make a new Patreon tier if it's not worth it.
Oh man! All right, well, buckle up for the triple header, everyone. We're about to kick it off. Thanks everyone for listening. If you would like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.